today we have a very special guest with us, Leo Pareja, the CEO of eXp Realty, where I gladly hang my real estate license. I was actually with eXp when I first got into real estate, left and came back. So it's always fun to jump back in and take full advantage of the community. Thank you for being here with us, Leo.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. It's an honor to have you here. I wanted to share a little bit of my story just to kind of bring you up to speed. In middle of 2020, after 10 years working for a big nonprofit, I moved to Florida. And I had never lived in Florida, had never worked in real estate, and had never made content, and decided, why not do all of those at once? So I jumped into real estate and kind of tried a bunch of ways to get leads and found that YouTube was the way I wanted to move forward. So I started a YouTube channel talking about the area. Even though I was new, it seemed to work. So year 4 of that, and just actually hit eXp icon for the first time. So that's super exciting. Thank you. So, and they called me and they're like, did you get our email? I'm like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. So it was fun to like get the reveal on the phone like that.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So now my focus is really other agents. So the YouTube channel runs the business pretty well. I have a partner that helps me with that, and now working on building the community of agents that I can help and help succeed. But I've done some research, listened to you, so I'm going to bring up some things you've said. I think there'll be things you're going to enjoy talking about, because I'm not only thinking about real estate, I'm thinking about people too. And something you bring up regularly is that most agents, let's say most people are average. So a lot of the systems get built for the average. And I wanted to start off like, what makes someone better than average? Because in my community, that's what the agents are asking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so average is such an interesting word, right? Because like you said, and one of the interesting things about my entire journey is that so much of what I've said has been recorded for so long, so long, that I get the pleasure of being right and wrong in perpetuity with it being recorded. So it's when I talk about average, I actually use it a lot of times in what I call the sample size of 1, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like so many agents talk about lead gen or tactics, and they're like, will this work on X? And you think of the target group as like this different than you sample size of human beings.
Sure, yeah.
And we before you started hitting the record button, I was just in Europe for quite some time visiting a bunch of our agents. Did eXpCon International, and I had a stack of mail this big when I walked into my home office. And I literally just opened it. This is real life, right?
Yeah.
Over the trash can.
Yeah.
Right? And do you see how much in there is
marketing,
real estate flyers and marketing, right?
Yeah.
And I always tell people, like, most of the time that doesn't even get through the front door.
Yeah.
It just gets opened up over the trash can outside.
Right.
Right? And so I say I'm remarkably average in so many things. I'm 5'11", 180, 190 pounds, depending on the week. I have a beard, and like I think I just described you and every other guy in like an 80 million American bracketing, right? So I always just say, listen, what works on you as a sample size of 1 is super important. And so your strategy of YouTube, I think, is brilliant. I think if I were starting today, I'd probably go all in on that. And that's just from spending time with our agents who are crushing it, right? One thing I've been talking a lot about, I just made a Facebook post that got quite a bit of attention, and I said to team or not to team, right? I think over the last decade or two, teams have been glamorized. I was a highly productive team, but I also focus on profitability.
Sure.
Right. I've been quoted saying that a lot of teams are more like loosely affiliated gangs, right? They're not actual teams, right?
Yeah.
To me, a team is lead gen based, right? There's a rainmaker who creates an excess of leads that doesn't have anywhere to put them but the trash. And that's why you scale, right? So I obsess with, telling people to maximize their dollar productive time activity. I give people a math problem to divide their last year's 1099 by 2080, which is what the Department of Labor says is a full-time employment, and that'll tell you what your hourly rate is.
Okay.
And then I would encourage people to create leverage, whether it's with virtual assistants or even, full-time employees, and take off the still required parts of the business, right? Transaction management,
Right.
paperwork, even some of like the analog versions of the lead gen. But like with you, it sounds like YouTube content creation is 80-90% of what you need to spend your time on.
Right.
And again, if you were building a team, actually servicing the leads and closing the leads is probably not the dollar productive act. The dollar productive is creating that lead that you can then hand off, right?
Right.
And you could be a solo practitioner, and actually you doing the business is the important part, right? I lead a mastermind group of some highly productive flex teams, and one of the people shared last week that they had a big 20-person team, and they actually got rid of everybody. Now use Shwami for the in-person showings and the listing and the listing appointment, and does everything like this, right?
Right.
And his cost of goods sold, the COGS portion of the team, is like 3%, not 50 or 60 or 70%, right?
Right.
And so like he does, 150 units, but nets substantially more than when he was doing 400 or 500 units, right? So,
Right.
I always like to, think outside the box, push the limits, and say bigger is not better, right? Like optimizing for your lifestyle and what your goals are should be the goal, right? And that could be netting as much money as possible, because you then to go turn around and buy cash flowing real estate with that, or invest in the market, in equities, whatever your jam is. And going from there, what I like about what you just said about YouTube is, getting to spend time with agents who are highly productive. From what I've heard, and you correct me as the expert, like the conversion ratio of those leads is phenomenal, right? You're talking like
Absolutely.
50, 60, 70% versus Zillow leads or internet leads where you're like 1 to 4% best case scenario. And it's a somewhat confrontational, like, they're just show me the house with me giving you as little information as possible, versus like, from what I've heard, you get a YouTube lead, like they know Sam, right? By the time you get them on the phone, they've watched tens of hours of your content
on their TV.
They knows what your voice sounds like. They may know what your, if you have a partner or pets, like, do you like to do water sports? Like, from what I've heard, those leads are just phenomenal, because like if you have an accent, if you have any idiosyncrasies in your voice, like they know you.
Yeah. And if they're calling, they've accepted all those things.
Yeah, there's no objections, there's no anything to overcome on the initial meet.
Right. As I was starting to scale, my thought with a team was, I don't actually want to do the work of a team leader. So I don't want to start a team. I don't want to create that job for myself.
The closing part of that post I made recently said, if you go on the team building like journey, it's a leadership and business building journey, right? Which having the self-awareness to even say that from the onset is pretty good, Sam, because a lot of people like I want a big team, I want to do lots of numbers, and you
are you sure?
Well, it's not that you're not sure or not. It's you go from being a salesperson, which a lot of great real estate agents are, to being a people manager. Right. And statistically speaking, I don't think those two things always jive, right?
Yeah.
And again, teams have phenomenal leverage, and I've said this again in recordings. In my personal opinion, they're potentially the most profitable businesses in residential real estate, way more than a brokerage, way more than bunch of other things, like way more than buying cash flowing real estate, like the ROI. Like if you bring in $3 million in GCI and have a 15-18% margin business, it's hard to replicate that kind of net income.
Right, it is.
But it's monthly burn, it's payroll, it's people, HR, people, human problems, because then you're running a SMB, a small to mid-sized business that has all the things that come with it.
Yeah, it's true. So let me turn the question away from people and ask about brokerages. So if most people are average, then most brokerages are likely average. What makes eXp different among the others?
Yeah, so I answer what the company is in a couple of ways, and super top of mind. I say we are a platform that allows real estate entrepreneurs to scale whatever size dream they want, right? And so I think it kind of goes back to what we talked about in the beginning of,
Yeah, it does.
you know, it's perfectly cool if you want to sell 10 homes a year.
Right.
Justin Haver did north of 1,100 units last year in Calgary, Canada, and was our number one agent in Canada, of course, and worldwide. Avery Call did $599 million in volume for 956 units. She was our number one units in volume in the U.S. and number one globally for volume. And like these are phenomenal feats of business acumen, right? Like I'm talking
Right.
about 50, 60 licensed agents plus very large ops teams. And I'm excited to be in business with them as I am excited to be in business with the agent selling 15 homes a year,
Right.
right? And again, I said more is not necessarily better. It's like how many hours a week do you want to work? What kind of cash flow and
Right.
obligations to
Leverage
having
do you
leases?
want in your own life? Yeah.
Exactly. So what I think we've done different than everybody else is we're a fully scaled business that allows you to plug into that, right? I think of us I think of business as what is the most frictionless experience you can have, and that's what wins at the end of the day, right? Like
Right.
we're both on Apple products.
Right.
I have the watch, the
Yeah, they're all around us. Yeah.
the wallet, like,
Yeah.
and it's not because I'm a Steve Jobs fanboy. It's because it is the most frictionless experience I can have with security, data, photos, text, communication. Right?
Right.
I can respond on iMessage here, and so I'm constantly comparing ourselves to that. Right? I'm way more interested in doing what Amazon does than what other real estate companies do. Like, how can I onboard you as easily as possible? How can I pay you as fast as possible? How can I return your questions as fast as possible? And where I do truly think we're substantially better than everybody else is that we're at the right time and right place. We're fully scaled. We're profitable. We're sustainable. We have more buying power for technology, right? I can get you guys the same products that as a small independent, and I'm constantly curious about how people make that selection. So last November we had Michael Bean, the Bean Group, join in the New England market with 600 agents, independent, 3 decades as an independent, and he was able to shed his office space expenses and really plug into the machine we've built, and he was able to focus on pouring into his people, lead gen, like the sequence you go from an agent to a team leader to a broker. And again, if we go back to what we kind of the thread that's been the whole time is if let's say you just love selling and being with people,
Right.
you get away from that if you go down that path, right?
You do.
And so Claudia Cerna just joined us in Miami with 500 agents, 21-year independent. And for her, it was like I couldn't compete on technology, on like the bundle of services that you get.
Right.
And for her, the huge value prop being in Miami is that we're now a global platform. So she
sure.
was at eXp Con International in Portugal, and there are developments in Miami that qualify for an EB-5 visa, and the buyers for that product are actually in Spain and Portugal and the UK
Right.
and France. And so when you're an independent representing a developer in certain parts of the country, you're missing out on this global marketplace where it's very different to say, hey, because anybody can get on a plane and go do that, but versus,
Right.
hey, we're the 5th largest estate agency in the UK. We're the top 5 in Spain, top 10 in Portugal. Business growing in Dubai. We're the globalization of the world continues, right?
Right.
And so I think we're in a part of the world where that kind of interconnected ecosystem starts to become a very important part of the value proposition.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are fun stories. I want to go back to agents and like their specific goals because I think that's really important. That's something eXp does really well. And I want to just quote you here. Our North Star is to remain focused on teaching our agents the best strategies to take them from a new agent to CEO of their own company. And I often tell agents, even if what that means is that you work 40 hours a week and make a great living in your home every night with your kids, like if that's the goal you want to reach, like I want to help you reach it. And I love how flexible real estate is for that kind of a thing. You can, whatever the goal is, right?
Well, the sentence you said is actually much harder. It sounds so simple, but like agents who find a little bit of success kind of botch that part of it, right? Because, you know, this is something I talk about a lot. Like once you choose self-employment and real estate specifically, there's never an off button. I was actually just thinking about that this morning when I went to get a chiropractic adjustment, and he's actually out of town for a week, and he told me on the way out. But like, think about it. When he leaves his physical location, it's completely unplugged. There's no photos coming in or contract negotiation or a buyer's agent calling to get into the property because like he's gone, right?
Right.
And so any agent like who's especially a solo producer who's carrying any decent amount of listings or has offers out there, they fall into this trap of like it never stops, right? So
right.
If what you're focused on there, it's teaching them, it's like, you know, if you can be home for dinner 5 nights a week as a solo producer,
right,
you've gotten to a very rare piece of the business, right?
Absolutely.
And again, it's completely possible. I know many people have done it. I did it, but it's a very focused and on purpose, right? Like for me, early on as an agent, it was I focused on listings, right? Because you know, you don't need too many marathons on nights and weekends as a buyer's agent to say, okay, I need to control my time somehow. But then when you get to be a good listing agent, if you don't have like a call service or some VAs or anything like that, then you could find yourself talking through in a home inspection addenda through dinner 3 times in 1 week. And then you kind of defeated the purpose of the goal.
Right. You know, one way that I've forced myself to scale is we keep having kids. So when my second, we have 3 right now. Our third is 12 weeks old. Of course, it's an annoying parent thing to talk in weeks, right? But she's 3 months old. So when my second was born, I just knew I want to be home a lot. So I just forced myself the months leading up to that to hire a buyer's agent. Mm-hmm. Then the reality is the first deal that he did from one of my YouTube clients was the biggest deal I had ever done. And it just clicked. I'm like, okay, this can work with a really good lead source and with a team that you're like really supporting, someone that feels like a partner, someone that feels like they have a lot to gain in this and they're not just like working for you. Like this really could work. And then with the third kid, you know, I add more pressure.
Well, not to interrupt you, but like one of the interesting conversations I've had in the recent months is folks who had a team and then said, you know what, let me find seasoned solo producers who don't want to be on my team. 35, 40% referral fees, you know, thanks to Zillow and Rocket and everybody else, people are now used to paying that for a referral fee, especially for a solid convertible lead source like yours, where they don't even need to be on your team. Right. And then you could literally refer all your again, these are just me sharing anecdotes from having conversations every day with agents in the field, but I'm starting to see some mega teams say, you know what, maybe I just partner with, I'm talking about seasoned solo producers, 10, 15 years in the business. Right. Do 20, 25, 30 deals a year. So 2, 3, 4 deals a month. Not a newer buyer's agent who's kind of looking for a lot of support. Because like the reason I brought up the comment is you use that magical word of support because then you're back into the people management business. And so again, I'm seeing a lot of that, you know, where people are saying, hey, there's these super solid solo producers who I can farm out some of my buyer leads to. You know, you might not maintain the branding that you're potentially working towards. And again, those are the give and takes that you make the decision on. Yeah, I definitely went down that road at one point to build like the Living in Tampa lead program and had a couple agents that were on like a really good team that my friend runs, like ready to take these. And
pay me a big referral on the first deal and a smaller referral on their second deal. I had it all kind of worked out. And people just like went through the funnel and kind of disappeared because they expected Sam. Sam's in the videos. They need this experience a little bit. Mm-hmm. Even if it's like they're working with my right hand, they felt better. I found they feel better about that.
That's how I did it. That's the more traditional model where you know their business card said Leo Pareja team, right?
Yeah.
If you went on the website, there was a picture of them with me, right? So there was that close alignment. And I guess what I'll tell you is in 2 decades of doing this, there's no right or wrong, right? It's what works
Absolutely.
for you and your business and your lifestyle and what your end goals are.
Right. So no matter what's going on in the market, I jumped into a very strange market, the pandemic, and I knew it wasn't normal. I had no expectation that anything would remain like that. I was also not very good when rates were really low. So I didn't do that much business that year anyway. But in light of everything, what are you most excited for agents right now?
So I will tell you that I constantly feel like I need to remind agents of this. And this kind of reminder or truth always seems to calm agents down. And it's that residential real estate is a unique asset class compared to anything else, right? Because it stores human beings. If you look at any other asset class in the world, equities, commodities, bonds, commercial real estate, income producing real estate, it's ROI, right? I put in X, I get Y, quarterly, monthly, annual APR, right?
Right.
Residential real estate can be looked at, but for the most part, it stores human beings. It's a long financial decision where, if it's close to what I'm paying in rent, I'd rather lock in the rate, get the equity on the upside, and be able to paint the walls pink if I want to, right?
Yeah.
And so knowing that it's extremely unique, but then you add the fact that it is purely, and I'm talking about 80 or 90% driven by human condition, right? Which is,
absolutely.
I said we're all remarkably average. Sam, the average person moves 3 times as a renter, 3 times as a homeowner.
Yeah.
Right? And my wife and I are no exception. I probably mathematically guess that same with you.
Yes.
Right?
But I've already moved 3 times as a buyer.
Well, but statistically uncommon, right? Like you move into your first apartment, you move 2 more times because both of you get a job opportunity or something.
Right.
Then you make a little person and you go from that apartment to whatever you can afford, which is your starter home, whether it's a townhouse or a condo or a small apartment or condominium. Then those kids get bigger. You need a backyard. You have the dog, and so that happens. And then they all move out, and you don't need the big house anymore, and you downsize to a condo or a townhouse again. And then the end of life takes you. And so if you look at it over a 50-year period, worst years in history, about 4 million transactions happen. Doesn't matter what interest. I'm talking about like 2009, 10.
Right.
Last year, this year, 1992, late 80s, right? And the most transactions we've ever seen over the same period of time, 2006, 2011, perfect combination of low interest rates, lots of inventory, lots of absorption,
Right.
And that's about 7 million, right? So what I tell people is worst case is going to be 4 million transactions. Best case is going to be 7 million transactions. If that expands, it's a factor of household formation, births, deaths, all that fun stuff.
Right.
And available inventory. So there is never a zero, right? Like if there's an economic calamity, there could be a commercial building that sits empty for 2 years. I remember them. I know, 07, 08, 09. But residential rents, so like if rent was $3,000, I'm telling you there's a floor to that. You'd go to 1,700 or 2,300.
Right.
Because I remember new construction condos being delivered in the financial crisis, and they pivoted to an apartment, and they gave 3 months of free rent, and they'd lease up the whole building. Right?
Right. Yeah.
But it did not happen with the data centers. And it's not going to happen with the commercial office buildings in the next 24 months.
Right.
Right? Like if you move the cheese on the economy, like that genie's not going back in the bottle.
Right.
We still need housing over human beings' head. Nothing's going to
Absolutely.
change that. And
And
so
over the
that's
past
what
few
I
years,
always,
that's been the majority of our clientele too. It's the human condition decisions. Yeah, maybe the cart's before the horse a little bit. We want to move to Florida, so let's look for a job. But now you have a job and you're moving, all right?
absolutely. But um, that's where you said, what are you most excited about? My
Yeah.
most excited thing is for the people who choose this noble profession, which is to be that expert guide. And
Yeah.
YouTube, this analogy I've used on stage actually is a perfect fit for you, in the sense where I can say you can prepare to do anything online, climb Mount Everest,
Right.
go spearfishing, you know, in federal waters like I do,
Yeah.
and you can do a lot of it on YouTube, right?
Right.
The practice, the diet, the workout, the gear you need to buy. But when you're ready to climb that big mountain,
Yeah.
I
You gotta
highly
work.
suggest you hire the local expert who's done it 300 or 400 times, who can literally say, "Don't step there." And since I threw out the spearfishing, it's like I don't suggest you go by yourself the first time. Go
Yeah,
with
yeah.
the people who know the reefs and what dangers are out there and all that kind of stuff, because that's the difference of life and death. And financially speaking, I really think that about real estate, right? You don't want to overpay.
Yeah.
You don't want to miss a super important detail during the home inspection of like a cracked foundation versus like, is it a little bit of settlement or is it a crack in the actual
Yeah.
foundation? They
Yeah.
could look very similar, right?
Very similar, right.
You're in a competitive bidding situation and somebody waives that and you don't create the ability to even back out for informational purposes only. So
Right.
that's where hiring an expert is massively important.
Okay, one last question as we wrap up here. If you were to become an agent now, I want to know what you would focus on. But like, think about it. I've heard you also say people prefer a painkiller over a vitamin. What's the vitamin you would start taking right now?
So personally, and again, I just want to preface it with that it's personally specific to your
Right.
wiring.
Yeah.
Right. Mine has always been and will always be sellers. Right? Like if I spend
Sure.
any dollar on the vitamin, which is the long-term build my own funnel, would be sellers. And I personally always liked B2B. So like the investor grade, hedge funds, institutional
Sure.
buyers and sellers of real estate, because that's just my personality. But if I was dropped into a market and said, you need to make a living doing real estate, I would look up all the local investors who buy and sell real estate. And I would use this script. I would say, hey, may I take you to coffee? Because from time to time, I come across motivated sellers who need to sell quickly, and I want to understand what an opportunity looks like for you,
Right.
right? Because what I've learned over time is what you call a deal and what I call a deal and what somebody else calls a deal are different, right? People
Very
have different
different,
buy
yeah.
boxes. So if you do that enough times and you can identify in your local market who the real buyers are, and you build a list of 10, 15, 20 investors, right? You can actually build a profile of both geography and product that overlaps, right? So you can say,
Right.
if I can identify a property that falls into this deal category, I have 5 or 6 or 7 buyers who would jump on it, right? And I would
Right.
identify that they're cash buyers and everything else. Then you turn around and you build a direct mailing campaign or social media or geo-targeted social, Facebook, YouTube
Right.
ad, and say, I have cash buyers who can buy your home quickly. Please call me.
Right. Right.
And you've created your own marketplace. And again, that's how I would do it. That's how my brain's wired. Again, for some people that isn't interesting, but that's how I would do it.
I love it, Leo. I appreciate your time. I'm excited that you're back in Florida, out there doing some fishing, hopefully soon.
Hopefully this weekend.
Leo, the CEO of eXp Realty, amazing company. Excited to see how you continue to grow the culture and continue to grow all these things for agents. Thanks, Leo.
Awesome. Thank you. Take care.